Welcome back, everybody. It is your pal Orange Hat here to bring you another theme stream for the month. And as it is May, the theme is Star Wars. So, yeah, of course, this thing is going to shut off. So, yeah. And I was going to bring my lightsaber on, but the damn thing ran out of juice. Haven't charged it in a while, and it will take a while to bring back. So, welcome back, everybody. So, as it showed, I am going to be giving my prequel thoughts to the stream today. And we got Neozoic in the house. I love his title crawl here. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Orange Hat Wars, Episode 1, the Prequel Trilogy. In an anniversary of once hatred and now adore yet flawed 3 Star Wars films, the Prequel Trilogy, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith, 3 films directed by Chancellor George Lucas, but the evil Sith Order led by the army of prequel haters to destroy his legacy to settle the conflict. A lone Jedi Grandmaster, Orange Hat, and his Jedi Order, us in the chat, we'll discuss both the light side and the dark side of the films to bring order and peace to the galaxy. And in all seriousness, howdy Orange and all the good folks in the chat. Howdy Neozoic, it is good to see you. Howdy everybody else on on X and on YouTube. So yes, we are going to be getting into this. Oh, pardon me. So yeah, I grew up in the 80s, folks. Hey, Nerdy Ogre, good to see you. And one of the things that I absolutely loved was Star Wars. I was 2 years old when my father put that VHS in the VCR, hit play, and let it run. All 3 of the Star Wars movies were on that VHS. I remember all the different feelings. And again, I was 2 years old. And, well, I do remember that I felt excitement at the music. I remember feeling fear at the look of Darth Vader. I immediately understood bad guy. The music was a very good emotional guide. So I understood feelings from the movie. I understood the concept of the movie even though I was very young, and it stuck with me all those years. And then I started getting into the books when I was old enough, and the Thrawn trilogy, loved it. But today we are discussing the second trilogy, which is the prequels. And when it comes to the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars series, Neozoic, I will be discussing that as part of the EU discussion. Because that will be in 2 weeks from now. I will be discussing the EU Star Wars, which Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars is a part of. And hello, Vanya, good to see you. And so, yes, when I heard back in 1997, when the special editions were coming out, the 25th anniversary editions of Star Wars, the special edition, I went to see Episode 4 in theaters. And I then also saw later that night a report that episodes 1, 2, and 3 were coming to theaters. Now, I first saw the trailer to Episode 1 when I went to the theaters in Buffalo with my family. We had just lost my grandmother. And so my uncle was charged with taking our mind off of the loss. So we went to see a movie called 10 Things I Hate About You with Heath Ledger and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So during the trailers that they have at the beginning of the movies, Star Wars Episode 1's trailer came up. And boy, was I excited. Everything was starting to get super cool. I was like, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. My mind was off the loss of my grandmother. I was super excited. Got a good laugh out of the movie, 10 Things, but my mind just kept on going back to Star Wars Episode 1 and wanting to see it really badly. I saw Darth Maul with his double-edged light or double-bladed lightsaber. I saw Darth Sidious, the mysterious figure that you only saw in the trailer as a hologram figure. And there's all the other things. I mean, the droids, the Jedi. I was wondering who Qui-Gon Jinn even was. They didn't say his name, but I was wondering who it was. I understood that Anakin Skywalker was going to be a child in it. And then I finally got to see it with my mom. I went to see it in Lake Placid. It was like a week after opening weekend so we thought there wouldn't be such a huge line. However, there was still a huge line. People underestimate how popular the Star Wars prequel trilogy was. And so I went to see it, and I enjoyed it immensely. I mean, that's how much I could actually say. We go to Blockbuster, or without a prequel trilogy, the 2003 Clone Wars series, I wouldn't have been introduced to Star Wars universe. Hey, man, you eventually would have if or with the original trilogy. Eventually, you would have come across the original trilogy. Howdy to everybody else. We'd go to Blockbuster in VCR, New Hope, while eating pizza. Yep. Star Wars and pizza was the acceptable dinner. Then watch Empire Strikes Back. We'd have root beer floats while watching Return of the Jedi. Awesome childhood memory. Absolutely, man. I mean, I remember a lot of my Star Wars memories back in the day. And my favorite Star Wars I remember being down in Buffalo with family. My mom's side of the family was in Buffalo. And I was at a park, and they were doing this celebration, and they actually played over the loudspeakers the Star Wars anthem, the Star Wars theme. And it's like, it's super cool, man. Yep, before Darth Maul's name was revealed, everybody thought Maul was Exar Kun. That was an interesting fact, yes. But yeah, when I learned about who they were, who the different characters were, and I saw that there was an article in Time magazine that showed the construction of the double-bladed lightsaber, which was Darth Maul's lightsaber. And when I saw this, or all of this stuff, it was so cool. But then I got to see it in theaters. And I saw Yoda. They had Puppet Yoda back, which was a younger looking Yoda. Now, this was before they revamped the prequel trilogy, folks. They didn't have as much as the pod race sequences as they do now in the general release of Episode 1. They didn't have the digital Yoda in Episode 1. They had, or it was puppetry, and it was a couple or a few minutes less, because nowadays, if you get Episode 1, they extend the pod race sequence. They give you the full extended pod race sequence, aside from the gastrointestinal evacuation of the EOP that had the look of like it was about to shit its brains out. They took that out, thankfully, because that wasn't needed. But I understood why they put it in. It was good for a laugh. And a lot of people do give Jar Jar Binks a lot of shit. I hate those people. If you have a problem with Jar Jar Binks, and you were all for the artwork that showed Jar Jar Binks getting clocked by a clone trooper, and it's saying it's all your fucking fault and whatnot. Yeah, it is fucking Jar Jar Binks' fault. But you know what? If Jar Jar Binks wasn't the one to propose emergency powers, I guarantee you there would have been some other poor sap that was just as naive, just as admired to Palpatine as any other. Or I mean, he basically owned the goddamn Senate. He had such love in the Senate that they wanted him to stay longer than his 2 terms. So yeah, people don't realize that Palpatine and Plagueis at this time, because during episode 1, Plagueis, his master, was alive. I do acknowledge Plagueis as EU legend, but I only acknowledge around 80% of that book, because they do unfortunately give Darth Maul the Dathomiri background. He is not a Dathomiri Zabrak. My apologies, folks. My hand ran across the mouse pad down here and it accidentally kicked me out. My apologies for that. But yeah, I do not like the bit in Plagueis novel where um Darth Maul's where Darth Maul's origin, sorry, had a bit of a oh, I'm sorry folks, I'm having a bunch of brain farts. I was having a bit of a brain fart. But his origin, I do not like that Maul's origin was changed from Iridonian to Dathomirian. And oh, hey Jet Sparks, good to see you, buddy. I think early concept for Darth Maul was a female that eventually evolved into who we would see as Mother Talzin. There were, if you look at the concept art um for episode 1, you do see Sith witches and whatnot, which would eventually evolve into what we know as the Night Sisters of Dathomir, Filoni style. That's the wonderful thing about George Lucas. He actually went back and used, or he would use abandoned or denied concepts for later use. Even a magical flashlight was magically turned into a lightsaber. Oh, you damn right. Everybody used those damn things like that back then. And if they had made Jar Jar a Sith or kept him as such, if you believe the fan theory, when I would have had a big problem with him. Then I wouldn't have had a big problem with him. Thing is, Ahmed Best in his earliest years of Twitter, he actually confirmed that Jar Jar was a Sith. He was used by Plagueis. He was to be essentially Plagueis was going to essence transfer into Jar Jar Binks and be a Sith Lord watching from the shadows. And that was the death of Darth Bane's, or the beauty of Darth Bane's rule of 2. It just worked in the Sith are Venom. Yeah. Michael Jackson, yes, that Michael Jackson originally wanted to play as Jar Jar Binks, but Jackson wanted to use prosthetic makeup, while George Lucas wanted to use all CGI. Yeah. Jar was annoying, but he gets way too much hate. Damn straight he does. What are your thoughts on the popular theory of Darth Jar Jar? He was originally meant to be a Sith Lord. This was all but confirmed by George Lucas. Hey, Riot Kitty, good to see you. I'm guessing from the fact that he was Iridonian comes from the Phantom Menace novelization. It comes from not the Phantom Menace novelization, but other novelizations. He was from Iridonia originally. He was taken from Iridonia. And Lauren Lanning, who created Oddworld and is a huge fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, was disappointed after seeing episode 1. That's his problem. Me, I enjoy the prequels. I have always enjoyed the prequels. And yes, I even will defend the sand comment. So when I get to episode 2, I will discuss that. But Darth Jar Jar, that theory was, but they wussed out because kids started loving him. Yes, they did change it because he needed a more kid-friendly aspect to Star Wars. Because remember, Star Wars, or George Lucas actually went to child psychologists during the making Return of the Jedi, in which he wanted to make sure that people or kids would understand and believe or understand and not be afraid of the concept of Darth Vader being Luke's father. So yes, he did some consulting and whatnot with this movie, or with these movies in mind. And yes, he made Jar Jar Binks a bumbling character. But to me, Jar Jar Binks has always represented naivety and innocence. He has always represented sort of a cautionary tale, but also purity in a way. I don't like how the Clone Wars made him more traveled than usual. But I think that Jar Jar, while his intentions were purely good, he had no idea that Palpatine was a Sith Lord. He hadn't. Jar Jar Binks was an idiot, folks. He was an idiot. And that's not a bad thing to say. But he also did mature after episode 1. He became a senatorial representative. And yes, a lot of the senators scoffed and laughed at him because he was a representative of the Gungans on Naboo. But those same Gungans also respected Jar Jar because in his bumbling carelessness, he actually helped along events. He is actually the direct cause of the liberation of Naboo. People don't realize that. Jar Jar Binks actually deserves a lot more credit for heroism than people give him credit for. If it wasn't for him talking to Queen Amidala on Coruscant, we used to have Grand Army. That's why you don't like us, or Misa thinks. If it wasn't for that one sentence, she would never have come up with a plan to take back Naboo. She would never have thought to make peace with the Gungans, who would therefore help her liberate Naboo. She would never have been able to take back Naboo if it wasn't for Jar Jar being made a general. And if it wasn't for Jar Jar's clumsiness, he wouldn't have stalled the enemy long enough to where the ship up in space, the droid control ship, could be destroyed. Also, there was the bumblingness of Anakin, who accidentally destroyed that ship. And a strange bad email, or strong bad email, strong bad red, the sender's home, Mesa, Arizona, instead of Mesa, Arizona. He said, oh yeah, well, Misa thinks you need to stop talking like that right now. Whatever. I'm pretty sure Night Sisters probably kidnapped a lot of male Zabrak babies from Iridonia and bred them to be warriors on Dathomir. that is a possibility, but here's the thing. The Witches of Dathomir didn't have technology to travel the stars. When Yoda was younger and they tried bringing or setting up a training camp on Dathomir, the Jedi were wiped out and they had to force a retreat. Unfortunately, the ship didn't work, and Luke would eventually find a message. Repulsed we were by the Witches of Dathomir. So yeah, they never had, or they were not allowed to be off planet. But getting back to episode 1, a lot of people do not give Jar Jar enough credit. And I will be a Jar Jar defender all the days of my life. Shmi Skywalker. And a lot of people continue to say, oh, Palpatine was Anakin's dad. And that was the original concept, where it would eventually be, I was the one who created you through the midichlorians of the Force. Except, yeah, that was the original concept, but George Lucas decided that wasn't the best route to go. And then he even went further away from it by saying that the Force reacted to the Sith forcing the Force into submission. And the Force retaliated by impregnating Shmi Skywalker, by having her conceive a child born of midichlorians to the Force. And another thing that a lot of people don't realize is Shmi Skywalker is Force sensitive. She could always sense when her child was nearby. Read the visual dictionary. You will understand you have to be able to interpret the Force at least a little bit to sense, or to be able to sense presence in the Force. She was able to intuit when her son was nearby and safe and whatnot. So yes, she was minorly Force sensitive. Could have been possibly because the Force conceived inside of her. Also, I still find it weird that Palpatine's first name is she. Palpatine doesn't have a first name. Nobody knows what Palpatine's first name is. I reject the Sheev. I'm sorry, I do. He rejected his name because he didn't like his family. He hated his family. He murdered his family. No wonder in the Plagueis novel he only wants to go by his surname, but then again, it's family, or his family all hated him. His family, or his father, hated him. His mother still loved him. His siblings still cared for him. He straight up murdered him in his rage against his father. But that is before the prequels. But getting back to the prequels, because that stuff is EU talk, or is EU talk, folks. I will discuss the Plagueis novel and other topics outside of the prequels in the EU topic, or in 2 weeks. Trust me, I will discuss all that. But getting back to the prequels, episode 1. One of the things I absolutely love was the Duel of the Fates, as well as the attack on Tatooine. When you see Darth Maul just cutting loose, it's like, this is a man who wants to, or whose singular purpose is to kill Jedi. What a lot of people don't realize, Darth Maul doesn't have ambition to overthrow his master. He understands he is a tool, because at this point, Sidious, Palpatine, did not ever expect that Darth Maul would be killed. He never expected it. Except he was killed. And he was killed by a Jedi Padawan. And that scared the hell out of Palpatine. He was afraid of Kenobi for a time, until he realized that Kenobi was, or could easily be killed if it ever came down to it. However, going towards episode 3, which I'll get to in a little later, I will tell you why Obi-Wan Kenobi is one of the strongest human Jedi out there. and one of the best Jedi out there when it comes to human Jedi. Also, it's ironic that people complain about Anakin being whiny, yet they have no problem when Luke was whiny. Yeah, that is true. But here's the thing: an episode or Anakin was always emotional. He had a loving family. He was brought into the Jedi Order in an unstable age. At 9 years old, he already has an emotional connection to his mother, to his friends. He doesn't want to. His mother was basically his whole world. It was the place where she was his comfort. To be taken away from that, to also then be plagued by visions of his mother's death, and also to be in love at 9 years old with a 14-year-old girl, because he straight up says in the novel, "I'm going to marry you." Said that straight to Palpatine, or not to Palpatine, but to Padme. It's like, "I'm going to marry you," and it's like, what? Do you feel that, or how do you feel about people saying Darth Maul was wasted, even though Darth Maul was a Sith assassin, not a Sith Lord? He wasn't wasted. A lot of people sure loved Darth Maul because that is all that we had of him. People sure of obviously that people wanted more of him. However, Maul couldn't have lived past episode 1. They needed to keep the Sith at bay. The Sith needed to be revealed. They couldn't be out in the open. So yes, I understand Darth Maul, or a lot of people love Darth Maul, but he wasn't wasted. He died on Naboo. I do not acknowledge the canon or the perceived canon of Filoni Wars. I don't do that. I'm sorry. When it comes to Darth Maul, he wasn't wasted. Getting on to episode 3, or no, staying on episode 1. There's also the stuff with the bureaucrats and the corruption in the Senate. People don't realize that the Senate has been corrupt for many, many years due to the Sith's influence. I will explain more of that in the EU section coming in 2 weeks. But yeah, by this point, Padme, 14 years old. People don't realize that Padme was only 14 years old when she was elected queen, or 13 years old when she was elected queen. And she gets 2 4-year terms, essentially. So when she is 24, or when she is 23, or no, when she was 21, her terms as queen were up. She would eventually, or then she would serve as senator. But she also still always cared for Anakin. A lot of people say, oh my God, this is disgusting. She's an adult. Natalie Portman was only, I believe, 16 when she did, or when they started filming episode 1. But she was playing a 14-year-old. And a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old, yes, it's slightly inappropriate, but it was a very strong connection. There is a lot of psychological things that a lot of people do not acknowledge that is in psychology. If you have such a strong devotion to somebody, if you care for them so strongly, and they eventually pick up on that, they may actually, through time, learn to reciprocate those thoughts. That is actually something that has happened throughout the years. A person who has such strong feelings for you, you eventually realize that maybe there is a little bit of you that does reciprocate. That is how I see the relationship as it starts between Anakin and Padme. She cares for him, yes, because she helped them in the greatest moment of need. But she also understood that if he became a Jedi, they could only be friends. Then he comes back, very strongly still infatuated with her. And in the book, you realize she does love him. However, she is more professional about it. And yes, she does rebuff him in the movie just as much as in the book. It's like, we can't, or we get, or despite us loving each other, we can't do it. You're a senator, or you're a Jedi. I'm a senator. It can't work. We would lose, or our lives would be destroyed. Except that people don't realize that Palpatine set this whole thing up, knowing that Padme would be put off balance, and that Anakin would also be put further off balance by having him attached to protect her. The one thing that Palpatine hated in Episode 2 was was Padme Amidala. He hated her so much that he was trying to get her killed. A lot of people say, Palpatine cared a lot about Padme. He only used her in order to further the goals of the Sith. People do not realize that if it was up to him, he would have killed her, or he would have had her killed in order to infuriate Vader or to infuriate Anakin. But things were already progressing without much of his help. All he needed to do was put the suggestion of protection to the Jedi and have Kenobi and Skywalker be her protection. The rest would follow, or the rest would take care of itself. Anakin would not be able to resist wanting to be with Padme. Padme would eventually give into her, even though she was strong-willed, she would eventually give into her feeling for him. And yes, Qui-Gon Jinn is an underrated character, so I will go back to that for a moment. How do I feel about people saying that Qui-Gon Jinn is a great Jedi? There is a person that I once had associations with, but no longer do. I do agree with that person's assertions that there is no such thing as a gray Jedi. There is no such thing as a gray Jedi. However, about Qui-Gon Jinn, I will say this. He was the best Jedi in the Order. And this is why. He followed the will of the Force, where the Jedi Order as a collective followed the will of the Republic and politics. He understood that small things like Jar Jar Binks helping this Gungan could lead to great things. Qui-Gon Jinn, if you read the books, a lot of people hated him because he gave himself to small causes. And yet, all of those small causes paid out brilliantly. Small cause number one, Jar Jar Binks. Saving Jar Jar Binks allowed them to save Naboo. Saving Jar Jar Binks allowed Naboo to have a fully peaceful planet between the Gungans and the Naboo. If it wasn't for that one simple kind act and choice to serve or to have Jar Jar Binks stay with him, guess what? The whole freaking galaxy would have been thrown into turmoil a lot quicker. But because Qui-Gon and his small battles, we had what happened. And yes, while if Anakin never left Tatooine, obviously he would have never became a Jedi, slaughtered Jedi and whatnot, and became Darth Vader. However, here's the thing. Anakin still would have turned to the dark side because of the possessiveness of being a slave. He would have lashed out, acted out, and whatnot. So yes, there are theories that Anakin, even without being trained as a Jedi, would have eventually become too powerful for even slave owners. Even Yoda realized that Qui-Gon was the perfect Jedi and became his apprentice after the Revenge of the Sith. Yes, In retrospect, he understood that Qui-Gon Jinn was right in many ways. The living force versus the unifying force. Most of the Jedi used the unifying force and followed the teachings of the unifying force, where Qui-Gon listened to the living force and therefore was able to perceive things in such ways that allowed him to stir galactic events to the way they did. Him sensing the force in this boy and doing certain things, he was listening to the force more than he was listening to the Jedi Council, because he understood that the Jedi Council could be wrong. They were fallible. And yes, he was seen as impetuous and roguish, but that was because he understood that things were a lot more important than the Jedi were realizing. And even though the Jedi, in their collective wisdom, said that Anakin's future was clouded, Qui-Gon Jinn, I guarantee you, if he had lived and became Anakin's Padawan or became Anakin's teacher, his Jedi or his master, Anakin would never have fell to the dark side. Even if Anakin had found Padme years later and Qui-Gon Jinn was still alive, it was Qui-Gon Jinn's death that began Anakin's fall. His official fall, because he was now exposed to the Jedi. Anakin would have eventually fell to the dark side. That was a foregone conclusion, because he was always emotional. He couldn't keep his emotions in check. Orange Hat, how do you feel about the criticism of midichlorians? A lot of people love to bash the midichlorians. You and I should have a little talk about Jar Jar one day. Sure, Nerdy Ogre. Are you on Twitter? If you're on Twitter, look me up at OrangeChat2185. Hit me up, man. Midichlorians, they were never talked about in the original trilogy. That's because the original trilogy was done before the prequel trilogy, as well as nobody really gave a shit about midichlorians when the fucking galaxy was in what's known as dark times. So yes, midichlorians were the scientific perspective of something that was beyond normal people's understanding. It allowed people to have a little bit more understanding of the Force. So having the the whole midichlorians thing, I have no problem with it. People, or when it comes to the Force in the original trilogy and whatnot, who says that it did, or there wasn't something part inside of all people? I mean, it's as Obi-Wan says, the Force is what gives a Jedi its power. It is an energy field surrounding and penetrating all living things. Well, it's because of midichlorians that allow certain people to interpret the Force. Midichlorians aren't what give Jedi their power. It's what allows the Jedi to interpret the Force. It allows them to have greater sensitivity to the Force. People often do not understand that the minute details and the digging deep into the minutia can be just as important than just telling a great story. Midichlorians are no more or less the interpreters of the Force. Some people have a greater number, which allows them to wield and interpret the Force to a greater degree, where others do not. However, all beings are touched by the Force. Aside from the Yuzong Vong, they were literally banished from the Force. But I will discuss that in the EU or in the EU stream in 2 weeks. People got to realize that when you are arguing, oh, midichlorians weren't in the original trilogy, that doesn't mean shit. It still meshes well with the original trilogy. Because here's something that you don't really understand. If it wasn't, or all George Lucas wanted to do was provide a little bit more in-depth detail to the Force. With midichlorians, allowing for interpretation of the Force and its will. That's all the whole thing about midichlorians is. Also, people complain about why the original trilogy didn't have advanced droids while the prequels had more advanced droids. People also don't realize that back in the 70s, technology wasn't as good as it was in the freaking 90s. People also have to understand that there are unfortunate consequences to the fact that when you are doing a prequel story to something that happened in the 70s, when you have the technology in the 90s, you are having, or you are going to be able to tell a greater story to a greater degree. Because if you look back way into the Old Republic, there was a thing called the Eternal Fleet. Why isn't Star Wars Galaxy as advanced as the Eternal Fleet now? You have, or they have a certain thing, folks, where these droids were wiped out to such a high degree. If you had any sort of battle droids after the formation of the Empire, they were to be seized, they were to be destroyed. Ships that were I mean, there is your simple answer right there, Neozoic. The advanced droid technology, like the battle droids and commando droids and whatnot, they were to be completely destroyed. All droid units must shut down immediately at the end of the Clone Wars. Also, people complain, or why didn't the original trilogy have a CN2 technology Mandalorians, the ones the Yuzong Fong? Oh, you're that's being, or yeah, Zildjian. In universe, did people hate the droids because of the Clone Wars? Yes. Yes. There was that, plus Tatooine has always had a disdain for droids. They didn't like droids because droids made them uncomfortable, not just because due to the fact of the Clone Wars, but there were also a long history of hatred of technology. Look at the Sand People; they hate technology, which is why a lot of Disney Star Wars doesn't make sense. Um, Not to mention the fact that there was also Revan, and the fact that technology has always been a boon on Tatooine, due to the fact that if it wasn't for technology, Tatooine wouldn't be a desert wasteland. Tatooine is a desert wasteland due to technology, due to the Rakatans, or the Rakatans, the Rakata. So yes, a lot of people, or I can easily explain a lot of different things. It's like, oh, why didn't this happen in the original trilogy? Why didn't that happen in the original trilogy? If you actually pay attention to the minutia, all that shit is explained. But then again, those are theories and conjecture and speculation of why those things are like that. But guess what? Back when the original trilogy happened, and then you had the prequel trilogy, people were able to come up with things through deductive reasoning. And therefore, it made sense, or that was how people made sense of the differences between episode one, or between the prequels and the originals. Except or unfortunately, there were a lot of simpletons out there who couldn't use deductive reasoning. A lot of the kids who bashed it and the adults who bashed it and whatnot, they didn't want to use their deductive reasoning to understand how episodes 1, 2, and 3 fit in with episodes 3, 4, or 4, 5, and 6. They didn't want to use their deductive reasoning. It's a failure to listen. Kind of like what Padme said in episode 3. But moving on to episode 2, one of the things I did like was the diplomacy and the more um the more detailed information they brought about lightsabers. Darth or Darth Tyrannus, Count Dooku's lightsaber is so freaking cool. When I saw episode 2 in theaters, or before I get to the sand thing, folks, but I'll get to the sand thing in a little bit. When I saw episode 2 in theaters, when I saw Darth Tyrannus, Christopher Lee, shoot Sith lightning or Force lightning from his hand and whatnot, I'm like, holy shit! I thought that was just something that Palpatine could do, you know. And then I saw freaking Yoda cut loose as a Tasmanian devil, basically go ape shit on Count Dooku, and I kept on. It made me want to delve deeper into the books as well as into the lore. And if you do that, if Star Wars can do that for you, you will understand you will have a greater understanding using also your own deductive reasoning and then bounce these theories off of other people. You will come to a greater understanding of Star Wars than a lot of people who are fans of it nowadays, who are unfortunately introduced via Disney. They will not ever be able to understand Star Wars as you could. Did you wish that Count Dooku should have appeared in episode 1 as a Jedi Master before he fell to the dark side in episode 2? No. By having him as a mysterious character, who was already at that point getting ready to leave the Order. A lot of people don't realize Dooku was also introduced to the Jedi Order at an older age. He was 4 years old when he was inducted into the Jedi Order. He also had emotional attachments and emotional imprints. Hatred was one of those imprints. He felt disgust towards people he deemed lesser. Dooku was a perfect Sith in the fact that he would have fit in perfectly in the Old Republic, where there was a very specious, where it was very specious. He believed in Christopher Lee's character, Count Dooku, believed strongly in human superiority. You read that if you read the episode 3 novel. He also believed that technology blending technology with organics was disgusting. He hated Grievous, but he used Grievous as a tool. Dooku's thoughts on Anakin's prosthetic limb, he's like, a real warrior would have learned to fight one-handed. So, yeah, Dooku was of a different time, essentially. He was a master swordsman who was extremely talented. He was a fencer. That was what made him dangerous. But it was also his experiences in the Jedi Order, as well as a child on Sereno, where which also shaped his feelings. And I will discuss a lot of that later on in 2 weeks when I get to the EU. But seeing him, or Count Dooku, I wanted to get to know more about him, and I'm so glad that they have the novel Dark Rendezvous. You want to learn more about Yoda and Dooku and them? Read the story of Dark Rendezvous. You'll love it. But going to the one thing that a lot of people hate about episode 2. I don't like sand. It's rough and coarse and irritating, and it gets everywhere. How a lot of people call that bad writing. Folks, that is actually good writing. Now, you're all probably going to be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to unsub from this idiot. Before you do, let me sell my point, please. Anakin Skywalker was already established in episode 1 as being a very immature person who was very attached to his emotions, who was also hopelessly in love with a woman. Training to basically become a monk is going to make you less able to speak your mind in a way that is not awkward. So, yeah, having Anakin speak awkwardly and trying to impress upon himself onto Padme the difference between his life and his experiences with sand as to Padme's experiences with sand at the time, where she would lay out on a beach. There were no fucking beaches in Tatooine. What sand was to Tatooine is something that a lot of people on Naboo who have beaches do not experience. Go to Tatooine, you get sandstorms that could tear you apart, that can make your skin blister. Go to Naboo, go on, swim in the water, swim in a lake, lay on the beach. The sand is not that much of a problem. So yes, I understand how some people might think that dialogue in the Lucas era was, or in the prequel era, was lesser in quality than the dialogue in the original trilogy era. Again, and I stress this, it was of a different time. The golden age of the Republic before it had its sunset, compared to a more imperialistic time where you didn't have freedom of speech, where you did not have the more Shakespearean kind of lifestyle. So yes, there was a different time when people spoke differently. Anakin Skywalker was impetuous because he was essentially told he shouldn't be allowed to feel, yet he couldn't help but feel. And therefore, we had what happened at the end of episode 2, his marrying Padme when she finally gave in to her feelings. And let me tell you something, folks. The Jedi were aware of Padme's involvement with Anakin. They were not aware of them actually continuing their relationship. Now, if they had any sense, they would have listened to Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan has said it was a mistake for us, or he was talking to Mace Windu in one of the deleted scenes to episode 2. It was a mistake to assign us to Padme. Why? He has always had an emotional connection to her as a small, or even as a small boy. Well, Obi-Wan, you just have to believe he will stay on the right path. And then the Clone Wars started. Anakin Skywalker is not trusted by the Jedi Council because they fear his power. Ever since he became a Jedi Knight, he has allowed, or his power has only grown. The Jedi Council or basically gave up trying to control him because they couldn't, or they just basically pointed him at a target and he would somehow save the day. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker were household names in every house in the galaxy that still believed in the Republic. Read the episode 3 book. You will find a greater story than what the movie gives you. However, the movie is what is considered canon. And if you pay attention to that movie, you literally receive no connection to what has been created in between by David Filoni. Now, if you use the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, you do find a great connection where General Grievous was feared, where he didn't start coughing and wasn't sickly until after the battle or his time on the surface of Coruscant, when Mace Windu used the dark side to crush his chest to try to save Palpatine. Unfortunately, yeah. Orange Hat, did you wish episode 2 should have included deleted scenes to film such as Padme and Anakin visiting and meeting Padme's family? The Nayberry family. I believe that if they want to, they can actually, or what they should do is create or re-release episode 2 with the deleted scenes finished and put in, and see how people think or what people think. Because honestly, um not or I do like some of the sequences. However, I do understand why they were cut. They didn't really add too much to the story. So yeah, I would actually leave that up to the people. I love democracy. As Palpatine says. Me, I like the democratic process of a vote, but I hate the pure form of democracy. But anyway, moving on to episode 3, Anakin wanted to be a Jedi Master more than anything to save Padme because he felt that there may have been knowledge in the archives that were only accessible to masters that might lead to saving Padme. Unfortunately, he was being manipulated at the time. And if the Jedi would have shown any sort of wisdom in that council chamber when Anakin says, "How can you be on the council and not be a master?" I would have, or if I was Yoda, or if I was Mace Windu, I would have said, "Ask this guy over to our right. His name is Master Ki-Adi-Mundi. He was a Jedi Knight put on the High Council, and he was still a knight. He didn't become a Jedi Master until a couple of years later." People don't realize that there is backstory that can help you understand stuff. Ki-Adi-Mundi was a Jedi Knight, put on the council, not granted the rank of Master immediately. He still had to train a couple of Padawans. And then eventually he would be granted the rank of Master. It really was that simple. Also, if you read the novel of episode 3, you understand a lot more of why the council would not grant him the rank of Master. It wasn't so much that or even if he earned his spot on the council, they would never have granted him the rank of Master. They feared what he would do if he was given that title. They didn't trust him. They didn't trust him with that much of an ego boost. And it's a good thing, too. He would have felt like he didn't have to answer to the council. They saw another Qui-Gon Jinn that would potentially be worse than Qui-Gon Jinn if Anakin ever became a master. That was one of the reasons why they didn't grant him that rank. And yes, it pissed him off because in some ways Anakin would understand they never were going to make him a master. He understood the truth. He just didn't understand the details of the truth. Unfortunately, Palpatine was putting too much shit in his head. I don't know if you have seen the prequel "Villains Represent Foreshadow" comment. Yes, I do understand Maul hatred and Grievous. Yes, they do all. I am very much aware of this. What is your thoughts on Maul, Dooku, Grievous representing the foreshadowing of the downfall of Anakin? Maul, hatred, loyalty to Sidious. Dooku, Jedi fell to the dark side, and Grievous being a cyborg. There was also the hate, fear, or hate and pain and suffering gig. Maul was hatred personified. Dooku was the pain, or fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. So fear leading to anger. Well, Darth Maul inspired fear into Anakin Skywalker when he saw Darth Maul. Then there was also the fear leads to anger. Well, there was also the anger that Anakin Skywalker felt for not being able to save his mother because he felt like he was being held back. Anger leads to hatred. That anger was with him during his time on Geonosis, and his anger of being held back, and so he attacked Dooku without, or a masterclass swordsman, without thinking, and therefore he learned to hate Dooku because Dooku took his arm. Hatred leading to, or in resentment of the Jedi who were starting to use him and manipulate him, just as Palpatine was manipulating him. He would then come to resent the Jedi and hate them. And he would see them as evil. And that would lead to the suffering he felt, or the suffering of his time as Darth Vader. But yes, this also does hold true as well. Maul had hatred and loyalty to Sidious. Dooku was a Jedi who fell to the dark side, and Grievous was the cyborg. Yes, essentially, yes, there was also that as well. And I do agree with it. Episode 3, a lot of people don't understand this, but episode 3 actually took a time span of weeks, not days, weeks. After he rescued Palpatine, from the time they got back onto Coruscant, when Padme could still use the voluminous robes of hers to hide her pregnancy, to the point where she could no longer hide it. Yeah, it was more than just a couple days, which is suggested by the Filoniverse. It took weeks. It took weeks for them to basically get shit back going. Anakin having tormenting dreams about Padme. Weeks of that. Weeks of him trying to focus in on himself. Weeks of him not being trusted by the Jedi Master. And then finally, it all boiled down to the execution of Order 66. And a lot of people, I really do wish the book fight, or the lightsaber battles from episode 3's novel, were put in the movie, because oh boy, you would realize a lot of differences, folks. Palpatine, or Anakin, saw the fight between Palpatine and Mace Windu, and it was like an anime fight, essentially. Super speeding, whispering around, and all that shit. I wish they could show that better in the freaking movies. Unfortunately, it was the early 2000s and they couldn't. Also, speaking at an objective standpoint, looking at the scenes in the Chancellor's office between Mace Windu and the Jedi and Sidious, you will notice different Palpatine has different lightsaber handles throughout the entire fight. He actually has Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber handle in a few of those scenes. Hey, Becky Brown, good to see you. How are you doing? And it's always a pleasure. But also, folks, there has been a lot of debate, shall we say, of these things and getting stabbed with them and whatnot. Oh, well, how did the Jedi Council all die and whatnot by getting stabbed and this and that? And how come a lot of people get stabbed and live in Disney continuity? I will explain all of that in the EU discussion, because I will still somewhat defend the lightsaber injuries, but I will also destroy it as well. Because yes, there are high points to my arguments and low points that are easily debatable. But if you look at the fight between Palpatine and the 4 Jedi Masters, how he did a Force scream, first off, that snarling sound he makes when he's going up, that's what's known as a Force scream. That's something that Sith do to disorient their opponents. Did you wish the deleted scene and materials from the novel were included in episode 3, such as the seeds of the rebellion, Dooku and Sidious meeting Yoda and Windu and Kenobi meeting? That Yoda, Windu, and Kenobi meeting in the book was great. A lot, as I said, folks, Palpatine's lightsaber was beautiful. Palpatine's lightsaber was very elegant, and it was also used as the greatest insult to the Jedi. Because if you look at if you study Jedi's lightsabers and such, you notice that there is this gold material on the Jedi, or on some Jedi's lightsabers, such as Mace Windu's. That's what's known as electrum. It's not gold, it's electrum over in Star Wars. Electrum is a status medal that is given to Jedi Masters to let them know that they have achieved, or to let them somewhat express their mastery of the Force. That if a person saw that there was electrum on a lightsaber, they knew that they were dealing with a Jedi Master. And yet Palpatine put so much freaking electrum on his lightsaber, the gold handling, plating, and whatnot, it was meant as an insult to them. I have mastered all 7 of your lightsaber forms. I could slaughter you all easily. And he did. When it came to the book version of the fight between the Masters and Sidious, he didn't even leave his chair before Cess-18 and Agen Kolar were dead. He didn't even leave the chair. He had his lightsaber floating up behind them and they couldn't even perceive it yet. His lightsaber went through Agen Kolar's head, the back of his head to the front, and then it went through Cess-18, killing him. And then he somehow used the Force with such speed that Windu and Kit Fisto couldn't even perceive, and it's like, holy shit, what the hell are we dealing with here? Kit Fisto couldn't last long. But it was because of Mace Windu's use of Vapad that allowed him to last as long as he did and stand up to Sidious to the degree he did. Hey, Davian, good to see you, man. Hope you're doing it. Apologize for being late. Yeah, that's fine, man. And am I in time for Revenge of the Sith? Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Bob. But going to the invisible hand on Revenge of the Sith, how do you feel about the complaints of the overuse of CGI and the green screen effects? I understand that there are a lot of restrictions when doing certain movies on the scale of of Star Wars. You can either spend a shit ton of money building as much of the set as you can, which they did, or you can go to the digital thing. Unfortunately, George Lucas is a digital storyteller. He is a digital storyteller. And he preferred that if he could do it digitally, he would. But he also understood that there were things he could do practically and it would work as well. But going on to the Invisible Hand, and this is why Kenobi is one of the greatest Jedi of his time. Also, by the way, folks, on the Invisible Hand was not just the first time that Anakin and Grievous met each other, but it was also the first time that Obi-Wan and Grievous met each other. Here's the thing. A lot of people love the Filoni Star Wars. If you love the Filoni Star Wars stuff, that's fine. You can love it. I'm not saying you can't. But it was the very first time that those two Jedi ever met Grievous. And here is why. Grievous. If Grievous had been along with Obi-Wan Kenobi, or fought Obi-Wan Kenobi so many times during the Clone Wars, how is it that he was afraid of Kenobi? And how was it that he was so shocked when Kenobi took over the situation on the Invisible Hand when it was, or when everything was pointing to a very easy execution here. In the book, Kenobi uses the Force to such a degree. He gives himself over to the Force to such a degree that the Force acts through Kenobi, not Kenobi acting through the Force. He's literally possessed by the light side of the Force, into which he is able to perceive everything. Kind of like Godzilla in GXK. He has such an omniscience that he can feel the murderous intent of General Grievous when he is about to execute them in the novel. In the book, or in the movie, you see a very abridged version of what goes on. In the novel, you understand that Kenobi was not on that bridge. It was the Force on that bridge, acting through Kenobi. He stopped Grievous's hand from coming down with a lightsaber to kill him, just by a flick of his finger. The slightest flick of his finger through the Force caused Grievous's hand to shoot open against the neural signals that Grievous sent to his hand. Obi-Wan Kenobi was that fast. He also used it against Anakin Skywalker, or Darth Vader, on Mustafar, because not even Anakin was aware of what he did. So yes, he was able to use it on his mechanical hand as well. You got to literally look deep into these novels, folks, and you will be able to perceive things about the movies, about Star Wars, that your run-of-the-mill movie fans will never understand. And that is the main crux of it all. That is why, when it comes to Star Wars, I am such a fan to such a degree that I can understand a lot of the shit. And that is why, because I read all into it, I went down so many freaking rabbit holes that I feel that I could actually do a better job running Star Wars than Dave Filoni. And yes, I will say that with full certainty. Because if you look at what David Filoni did with Star Wars, you would see how his creative decisions completely destroy the continuity of the prequels between episodes 2 and 3. And harm harm even some of the episode 1 stuff. Did you know, or another fun thing, folks, did you know that Quinlan Vos was actually on Tatooine during the time that Qui-Gon Jinn was on Tatooine in episode 1? Yeah, Quinlan Vos was there. Just before Sebulba's about to pound into Jar Jar, Quinlan Vos is watching the whole thing. He's undercover. So that's an interesting thing that I'm guessing a lot of people didn't understand. And we got 5 people from YouTube and 5 people from X. Thank you to those who are on X. Feel free to say hello if you are on X. Your comment will show up. But yeah, when it comes to episode 3, and you see the here's another thing that a lot of people should also pay attention to. It's called the audio commentaries. You pay attention to the audio commentaries, you will learn things from George Lucas and the crew and whatnot that you would not understand otherwise. How do you feel about people complaining about the movie made General Grievous from a scarier badass to 2003 Clone Wars into a cowardly weakling? He is not a cowardly weakling in episode 3. He is a master tactician that understood that he was somehow outclassed by this Jedi that he had heard so much about, the negotiator, how this negotiator can somehow turn the direst of situations into a complete victory. He completely underestimated Kenobi. He became the approximation of afraid of Kenobi. So he fled because he realized there was no point in him dying there if Dooku was dead. The entirety of the war would be over if General Grievous was caught. So yes, Grievous fled because he needed to continue the war effort. He understood this. And so yeah, it wasn't until the Clone Wars show that explained that Dooku was more cowardly. And when it came to his second time against Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he threw himself at Kenobi using 23 to 24 lightsaber strikes per second. And Obi-Wan Kenobi was able to deflect all of them in 1 second. That was when he realized there is no way he can win against this man. I can't win against this Jedi. I have slaughtered countless Jedi, and yet this one is stopping me at this amount of output. I can't win here. If a person realizes they can't win, what are they going to do? They're going to retreat. General Grievous learned against Obi-Wan Kenobi, there is no victory. So he retreated twice. Yes, that is something that he wasn't used to doing. What do you think of both games of The Force Unleashed and the novel of the first game? I will get into that in 2 weeks, Davian, when I discuss the EU, my EU thoughts, the expanded universe thoughts. Also, people forget that 2000 Dooku instruction to Grievous, if any element is lacking, it is best to retreat. Yes, and the element of surprise was lacking. The element of victory was lacking when Grievous fought Obi-Wan. He realized that it's like, shit, I can't win here. But when he got to the hangar and whatnot, he was resigned that he could not win. So he was going to fight and try to kill Kenobi as best as he could. Unfortunately, Kenobi got the better of him. So yes. And here's another thing, folks. A Jedi trap was set on Utapau. There are 2 versions of a Jedi trap that were set on Utapau. What Grievous thought was the perfect Jedi trap, and who the mastermind behind the war, Sidious, knew what the Jedi trap was. You see, the Jedi trap from Grievous, a bunch of droids, no chance that he would be able to escape, and yada, yada, yada. Love how Grievous was a badass in 2003 Clone Wars and comics. Yes. He had a belt of lightsabers. He was slaughtering Jedi left and right to where the Jedi Council feared Grievous. And yet, but getting back to the Jedi trap, what Grievous thought the perfect Jedi trap was a bunch of droids thrown at a Jedi and a droid general who knew or who was able to fight along the best and slaughter some of the best Jedi ever. There's no way that the Jedi could win. However, the real Jedi trap was Grievous as the bait, the irresistible bait. And any Jedi going toward that bait, the Jedi lost. The fact that it was Obi-Wan Kenobi going to fight Grievous was the absolute best thing that could have happened, because you now took the one stable part of Anakin Skywalker and removed it from the equation. What happened when Obi-Wan Kenobi was assigned to go after Grievous? And Sidious knew it was going to be Kenobi, because he tells Grievous, expect the Jedi to come after you to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Grievous was worried, but Palpatine knew if he could get Kenobi away from Anakin, Anakin would fall. What happened? Anakin fell. He was so tired. He was so freaking unhinged at this point. Anakin was losing his mind because he couldn't sleep very well. He was having constant visions of his wife dying in childbirth. Then he was also having visions of Kenobi being there. So there was jealousy being put up in there. And now Palpatine was free to freaking run his manipulations on him roughshod. But even in that time, instinct gripped Anakin. One of the best parts is in the novel, folks, when Anakin finally realizes who Palpatine really is. Because when Palpatine says, become my apprentice, or at this point, Anakin is so freaking, it almost feels like he was drugged, but he wasn't drugged. He just felt, or he was just so freaking tired. But the second Palpatine revealed himself to be the Sith Lord, Anakin was on his feet, lightsaber out, ready to kill him in a heartbeat. Such a great scene in the novel. I wish they had done it that way in the movie. Because if they had done it that way in the movie, oh, fuck, that movie would have been so good. He had the blood of Sifo-Dyas in him. Yeah. Love how greedy. Yeah. Take it easy, Davian. Thank you for stopping in, man. Dooku secretly couldn't stand Grievous. Yes, Dooku hated Grievous. He trained him, but he hated him. He created Grievous as well. He manipulated the events on Grievous's home planet between the Huck and the Kaleesh. And he was the one who also crashed Grievous's ship. And then he was the one who had the Geonosians work on Grievous's droid body. And a lot of people don't realize Grievous was at Geonosis during the beginning of the Clone Wars. It's where he got his first lightsaber when he killed a Jedi Master with his own, or with his bare hands. In the novel, Anakin was going through visions that Raven was in the Raven novel. Yeah. Thing is, very powerful Force users are often gifted with the ability to foresee, or of foresight, visions. Anakin was extremely susceptible to visions in the Force because he was so powerful. If Anakin was trained right, if he was trained by Qui-Gon Jinn, Anakin would have destroyed the Sith and not become a Sith to destroy the Sith. Fun fact, if you paid attention to in the scene where Palpatine talks to Anakin about Anakin's mother in the Invisible Hand, you could hear the Tusken Raiders sound. Yeah, you could also hear that. Also, at the end, or in the scene of that in the novel, you understand that Palpatine was manipulating the whole damn thing with false promises to Dooku that if Dooku got overwhelmed at any chance, Sidious would step in. Wasn't the case. Dooku even pleaded with Sidious. He's like, you promised me amnesty. Amnesty, help me. It's like he's trying to, and that's when Dooku realized he was trying to get help from him, and he's like, not going to happen. Well, shit. I've been duped. And that was when Dooku realized I was never meant to be part of some great Sith empire. I was meant to be a stepping stone to Anakin Skywalker's fall. I was meant to be the first cold-blooded murder of Anakin, or victim of Anakin Skywalker. Now, a lot of people would argue, well, how is that true? Because Anakin slaughtered the Tuskens. Anakin slaughtered the Tuskens out of anger. He felt it was necessary to kill them. Where it wasn't necessary to kill Dooku, and yet he did it anyway. That's cold-blooded murder right there. How do you feel about the fan theory that Sidious killed Padme and then when she gave birth? It's bullshit. Utter fucking bullshit. Because if Palpatine was killing Padme, he would have sensed where she was and he would have sent a garrison to Polis Massa. You know, people, God, motherfucker, if they understood the Force. That is a theory that people do not understand the Force with, or people who don't understand the Force came up with. Believe it or not, you can feel where people are. if you are connected to their life force. If you have that level of awareness and you are able to reach across a galaxy, if that was the whole or if Palpatine was really that powerful, which they made him that powerful in Disney, which I will get to in 3 weeks when I discuss the Disney problem or the shit with Disney, there's no fucking way that he was or that Palpatine killed Padme. Padme died of a broken heart. And everybody's like, oh, how could she die, lose the will to live and die? It's like, if you love somebody to such a degree, you can literally die when you feel, or even when you have kids. It's called postpartum depression. You never hear of it? But she felt like her life had died when she saw that her husband had become an insane killer. And yes, she felt that she thought that there was still good in Anakin, that there was still good in him, but she had resigned herself to death. She had resigned her body. She had given up. And the strain of the childbirth, yes, it killed her, or the pain and whatnot can overwhelm you to the point where your body will shut down. By the way, folks, broken heart syndrome is a proven thing. You want to know how I know? My grandmother died of it. The same grandmother that I was talking about in this very stream. Her husband, who she loved very much, died a few months before. She was slowly giving up. Now, I'm not going to get too personal into it, but she was slowly giving up, and she died because of a broken heart. So, yes, Padme dying of a broken heart in the movie and in the lore is exactly what happened. She didn't die because Palpatine was draining her life. Because if he was connected to her, he would have realized there were 2 children that were born. He would have realized that there was a threat out there that he had to hunt down. Guess what he didn't do? Guess what he didn't sense? He didn't sense the children. In fact, the Jedi, or Yoda, pointed out she must still appear to be pregnant when she is sent to Naboo for her funeral, to make it appear that she died before she could give birth to the kids. So yeah, they made her still look pregnant, and and then it was like the kids died with her, unfortunately. And then he sold a lie to Vader. It seems in your anger, you killed her. Knowing that wasn't the truth. But he did it anyway because he wanted Vader to put aside to marry himself to the dark side. And when it comes to the EU discussion, I will discuss the Rise of Darth Vader novel, because that is also one of my favorite novels. But yes, this theory is absolute fucking horseshit. Speaking of Tusken, or Dooku would have liked the Brotherhood of Darkness. Yes, he would have. George or Orange Hat. Speaking of the Tusken Raiders, how do you feel about people complaining about why Padme stays with Anakin when Anakin admitted he murdered the women and children? It was widely known, folks, that Tuskens were seen as primitive killers and butcherers. Why would anybody feel bad about a very primitive and hateful species being wiped out, women and children? Anakin was in grief. She understood he was in grief. She understood all of that because she was in love with him. She understood his flaws. She accepted his flaws. It's one of the things you do when you are in love with somebody. Some things may disgust you, yes. But at that point, she understood this man was in pain. She cared for him to a degree, and she felt that she could talk about it later with him. if it ever needed to be discussed again. But at that point, she wasn't going to leave him. She loved him. She was already slowly giving in at that point to his affections. If people actually understood the concepts of love and basic psychology, they would understand the Star Wars movies a lot better. Psychology is a very important thing to know about if you are watching Star Wars movies. Padme was hurt about the Republic turning into an empire, and finding out what Anakin did in the Jedi Temple was what Anakin did, but Padme believed there was still good in Anakin. Yes, because she was also blinded by love. But once she heard what happened, once she understood that this man was power mad and that he had stopped caring for her, it broke her. It broke her. But she also felt that there might still be a way for him to come back. It was Kenobi that completely fucked over Padme by being there. Because Anakin would have eventually tried to make her see, even though she wouldn't have. Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader, goes into the greater detail about Padme's death. Yes, it does. And it said nothing about her being killed because because Palpatine muses over her death. And guess what? There's absolutely nothing that during Palpatine's musings that said he reached out with the Force and stole her life energy to give it to Darth Vader. No, he doesn't say anything about that. So yeah, there's so that entire theory is disproven with that book. So thank you, Becky Brown. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Also, they tortured and killed his mother. I'm sure she felt anyone would go crazy in that case. And yes, she would also feel that he was justified in doing it. And yes, there is what's known as a battle lust, a bloodlust. People can sometimes lose themselves. Palpatine fanboys say the dumbest things about him. They read too much comic vine. Yes, they do sometimes. In the novel, Obi-Wan knew Anakin's mother, but in the Kenobi novel, that he learned more about the death on the Tuscans that filled him with dread. Yeah. I haven't read the Kenobi novel. I still want to get my hands on it, but eventually I will someday. But I do understand there are some other things, because that was the Kenobi novel was the last EU novel that was released, I do believe. So I am going to look into it. I mean, unless somebody wants to send me a copy. But I will eventually get my hands on one. Even if it says Legends label stamp up top, I won't care. But yeah, the prequels, folks, there is so much, or a lot of people give a lot of shit about the prequels. Oh, the midi-chlorians. Oh, this and that. I don't understand their freaking gripes, because their gripes are born out of ignorance. Orange Hat, get the audiobook. I don't do audiobooks. I have a personal hatred for audiobooks. I do not believe that a person, if they have the ability to sit back and read, that they should read. The problem with audiobooks and stuff, folks, I've noticed it with me. I'm losing some cognitive ability. Reading helps me maintain my cognitive stance. I cannot get an audiobook and just listen to a story. If I have the ability to read it, if I have the resources to get it and read it, I will, because it keeps my cognitive ability going. The Kenobi novel takes place in the same time as the Rise of Dark Lord Dark novel. Interesting. Because also the end of that novel has Kenobi first talk with Qui-Gon. The same people that bashed the prequels love Dark Empire, which in my opinion is the worst piece of garbage ever written, although I don't blame the author. Lucas forced his hand. I will discuss that if it is brought up in the EU discussion, because there are some things that I am ignorant about in the EU. However, there are other things that I am not ignorant about in the EU. And yes, while a lot of Jedi died in Order 66, there was a handful that didn't. There was that four-legged Jedi that was like 1,000 years old that survived Order 66. Plus, a lot of the Jedi or Jedi rejects from the Agricultural War. To Elizabeth Esther or and Wandong Esterhazy. Try saying that name 3 times fast. I love the audiobook because it includes the music of Star Wars. Cool. Interesting. I still won't do it. I mean, hey, if that's your preference, Becky, that's awesome. I'm not going to fault you for it in any shape, way, or form. But I can't do it because it would, or it's allowing my brain to be less or to lose cognitive function. I mean, I would love to continue this sort of stuff for a few more years, but in a few, or you would, or you're already noticing cognitive degeneration in my streams. All the brain farts, all of the literally where I would just stop kind of like this and not say anything. That's literally my brain kind of doing a reset, micro reset, so to speak. And it sucks. But yeah, Starkiller's parents survived. Yeah. And I'll discuss that in the EU discussion. But yes, when it comes to the prequels, I love the prequels. I will defend the prequels. And while there are people who don't like the prequels, OMB reviews, Odin. I love Odin. He's a great guy. I will disagree with him on the prequels. I will disagree on the prequel haters. All the people who hate Jar Jar Binks, if they understood Jar Jar Binks by any measure, if they understood that a lot of the shit wasn't his fault, and if they understood a lot of his or some of his decisions had great positive impact, they might not hate him so much. All they look at when it comes to Jar Jar Binks, this was the guy that led to the rise of the Empire. When there was no stopping the Empire, you could kill Jar Jar Binks on Naboo, and the Empire still would have risen. The Sith would still have risen. It may have taken a little longer. It may have taken a little shorter. But the point of the fact is, Jar Jar Binks actually may have delayed the grand plan. Sith were thinking, it was all but inevitable. If Plagueis had survived, if Palpatine hadn't killed Plagueis, the Sith may have actually freaking the Sith may have actually ruled a lot longer than 19 years. Because I'll discuss this I'll discuss the Plagueis bit during the EU. Plagueis is one of my favorite Sith Lords, and I'll explain why. The Jedi became conceited, arrogant, dogmatic, and delusional. Yoda says it in the episode 3 novel. I was training the Jedi to fight an old enemy, one that had evolved beyond my comprehension. Yoda knew that when he was going to fight, or he realized when he was fighting Sidious, he wasn't going to win. He was going to try his damnedest, but he wasn't going to win. He realized that the Sith had changed, that they had grown beyond what they had ever imagined they could be. Yoda understood all of this. And still, he fought because he realized, I'm not just going to stand by and let darkness take root. I am going to give what I can, and if I fail, then I will retreat to help the next generation fight when the next generation is ready. He was very much, or next week when I get into the original trilogy, folks, I will tell you some stuff that a lot of people didn't realize. just as I have covered a lot of this. Who would win in a fight, Darth Bane or Anakin Skywalker? Darth Bane would slaughter Anakin Skywalker. But also, let me ask you this, Neozoic. Darth Bane, Orbalisk armor or no Orbalisk armor? And also pre-Orbalisk armor or post-Orbalisk armor? Pre, current, or post-Orbalisk armor, Darth Bane. Let me know which version of Darth Bane you're talking about. If you're talking about pre-Orbalisk armor, Skywalker would stand a chance. If you're talking about Orbalisk armor, Skywalker's dead. If you're talking about post-Orbalisk armor, Skywalker's dead. The only version of Darth Bane that Anakin Skywalker would have any chance of beating is pre-Orbalisk armor Darth Bane. No doubt in my mind that Darth Bane would slaughter Sidious. A lot of people don't realize this. The Sith Lords of older were a lot better and stronger than Sidious. A lot of people say, "Oh, Sidious was the strongest." That's because a lot of people think that said that George Lucas said he was the strongest. I don't ever remember George Lucas saying that Sidious was the strongest Sith Lord. I just don't see it. So in that case, Yoda was quite methodical in terms of how he planned ahead when going against Sidious. Yes. He knew that 2 Jedi, 2 Sith, if one was to fall, the other might win. Awesome. Turned out one won and one lost. However, the Sith still came out on top because if Anakin Skywalker had killed Kenobi and say Yoda had defeated Sidious, Darth Vader still had the full resources of the Republic to go after Yoda, or the new Empire to go after Yoda. And guess what? If he was to go after Yoda and he was only growing stronger, which a lot of people don't realize this, both pre and Orbalisk. Again, Neozoic, if Darth Bane pre-Orbalisk armor, he would lose against Skywalker. With the Orbalisk armor, Skywalker's dead. After he gets the Orbalisk armor removed, Skywalker is still dead. Because at that point, Bane's saber technique was so good, in a downpour, from that window over there to where I am here, Bane was moving his lightsaber with such a flourish in a downpour that not a single raindrop touched him as it was building to a downpour. That's how good Darth Bane's lightsaber technique. Darth Vader, what the fuck? Oh shit. So Darth Bane, only if it was before he got his Orbalisk armor would he have lost to Anakin Skywalker. But going back to the movies, Anakin Skywalker was already planning to kill Sidious on Mustafar. He already had a measure of his master's power, and he's like, "I sense a disturbance in the Force." And at that point, when Palpatine says that, "I sense a disturbance in the Force, you may be in danger," he's looking at, he's already noticed Padme's ship on approach. Yeah, danger of getting kissed to death. And yet he's saying, "Be mindful," or that there's a disturbance in the Force. Anakin's private thoughts: "I am a disturbance in the Force, and I will kill you the next time I see you." I mean, he already had a measure of his power, and he already knew that his power was starting to dwarf Sidious's. But power isn't everything. Skill can be a great asset. And again, Obi-Wan Kenobi went to Mustafar with one thing in mind: to kill Darth Vader. To stop the Sith. No more, no less. He was going to stop Anakin. He tried talking him down when he realized that he had no choice. When he said, "I will do what I must," he realized he was going to have to kill Anakin. But even during that fight, he still loved Anakin. But he also realized he had to let go of it. He had to let go of his caring for Anakin. He tried reasoning with him, sure, right before the end, but it only confirmed that that Anakin was truly lost. Yoda trained the Jedi to fight the old war, where the Sith had changed with Darth Bane, made the rule of two, and Darth Plagueis goes back into further detail. Yes. Becky Brown, you are a godsend when it comes to Star Wars lore, girl. Love how you're dropping facts here. If Anakin didn't lose his arm, he would have probably given Bane a good show or a good fight, but he never learned Force lightning. He would have eventually learned it without Sidious's tutelage. How do you feel about people's complaints the lightsaber duels in the prequels are too choreography? I would rather have choreography than just blindly swinging sticks around than going like this. What the fuck kind of choreography was even in the sequels? Or the Disney trilogy? They're not sequels, they're Disney shit. What the fuck was that shit? They were swinging baseball bats at each other. I saw better choreography in the movie Universal Soldier: Day of Reckoning with baseball bats. They were swinging sticks at each other in the Disney trilogy. It's too choreographed. The fuck are you talking about? What's wrong with choreography? What's wrong with making something look as real as possible? It's not sped up in episode 3, by the way. The fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, those two were drilled for months to get that shit in their head. And I love the fact that they did. Because that's how you get excellent quality. You know? Also, these are the same people who love lightsaber duels in the Clone Wars approach. When it comes to my thoughts on Disney stuff, I will also include pre-Disney Filoniverse. That is what makes the lightsaber battle so beautiful. Exactly. Having the choreography, showing that there are lightsaber forms. Form 1, through Form 7. Shicho through Neiman. Or not Neiman, but what was our 7th one? Juyo. Yeah, Juyo and Sheehan. Yes, Filoni Clone Wars or the Clone Wars completely ruined Grievous. I mean, folks, Grievous was a fucking Jedi murderer. He was a Jedi master killer. Hypori, he slaughtered masters. And through sheer force of luck, even though Kenobi doesn't believe in luck. However, somehow 3 masters survived. And it was only because Ki-Adi-Mundi knew Makashi that he was able to survive against Grievous. Oh, by the way, even Mace versus Sidious was beautiful. Mace versus Sidious is a lot better in the book. But yes, the movie was also a very well choreographed bit. However, some of it not so much. Shakti almost died from Grievous. Yes, she almost died from Grievous. And I believe, or I like the EU version of Shakti better. Anakin Skywalker did not kill Shakti. I don't care what the deleted scene says, because there's 2 freaking deleted scenes that shows the death of Shakti. There's Anakin Skywalker going in while she's meditating, and then there's the generals or the invisible hand death of Shakti. Me, I prefer the EU death of Shakti, which was at the hands of Starkiller, where Starkiller also almost died, where he, I do believe, also got stabbed by Shakti. But hey, there was another thing I wanted to talk about before I end it. We'll go for another 10 minutes, because we're actually building up quite a view of people here. 28 people on X. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in, and 6 people to the 6 people on on YouTube. I make sure to leave a like, folks, and smash that like button. Also, didn't Lucas say that those 2 deleted scenes both involve Shakti's death, confirmed to be non-canon? Yes, but unfortunately, it was made canon, or her Jedi Temple death was made canon, unfortunately, in the Clone Wars show. I just made it back, Nerdy Ogre. Hey, I'm not done yet, bub. We're still going. Starkiller and the Sarlacc killed Shakti. Yes. And that will be discussed in the stream on EU in 2 weeks. But next week is the original trilogy. But I'm still on this one. God, what was the other thing that I wanted to talk about? I think it was an episode 2 thing. Fuck. And we never heard of Maris Brood again. Unfortunately, because the decanonization of the EU. But anyway, prequel lightsaber duels, original lightsaber duels, prequel lightsaber, lightsaber battles. I think that was what I was discussing. I don't need those in right now anymore. But yes, lightsaber duels. Yeah, you're right there. I still consider anything to be, it's fanfic. Well, actually, no, it's corporate fiction. It's not fan fiction, it's corporate fiction. Fan fiction implies that you are a fan. They actually used Ray Park scan for Darth Maul Ahsoka duel, which I thought was awesome. That was as much as I do not like the Filoni verse, I do admit that there is some entertainment quality to it. And I will go into, and I will elaborate on that in further detail in the Disney, or in the last theme stream of this month in 3 weeks. Mace Sidious, Makashi, that's right. Shadiversity did a video on lightsabers and stuff. Why lightsabers had a beam and didn't have the wider beams and weren't bigger and longer and shit. And I did a tweet on Twitter, folks. It's like, dude, Shadiversity, man. I didn't tag him because honestly, I've tried tagging people and they've ignored me, even when I've was kind and whatnot. I mean, my critique of his video is meant in good faith. It is not meant to be insulting to him. But his knowledge, or he needs to research his knowledge into lightsabers and lightsaber technique and whatnot before he makes some judgments on certain situations, like why Ki-Adi-Mundi died so quickly against the clones during Order 66. I still love to get my hands on the movie script written in the style of Shakespeare. Yeah, nice. But when it comes to Kiyoda in Order 66, Kiyoda is a fencer. Makashi is a lightsaber versus lightsaber form. And it is meant, or it is not meant for blaster deflection. Now, if you do use it for blaster deflection, it is essentially a basic like Shicho, which is Form 1. However, it is very weak against blaster deflection. So, Kiyoda, who is a master of Makashi and no other lightsaber technique, he wouldn't last long against any or multiple blaster wielders. He would die in a matter of seconds, which he did. So yeah, I'm sorry, but if you are going to critique something, you should at least have all the knowledge at your disposal, available at your disposal, to include in your critique. DM So beats Makashi. DM So can beat Makashi, yes. DM So is a very aggressive, or it's essentially like Juyo. It's extremely, or it's power focused, where fencers are more precision focused. You can beat a Makashi user using DM So if you have the power behind it. Makashi beats Sorasu. Sorasu beats DM So. Yes, that is what happens in the books. However, if you know how to use Sorasu, or if you are the master of Sorasu, like Obi-Wan was, there's a reason why he won, and it wasn't simply just because of lightsaber technique. Mundi was completely off guard when the lightsaber form and his lightsaber form wouldn't save him. You are absolutely right, Becky. You're absolutely right. I love the music between Yoda and versus Palpatine. Yeah, it was a callback to Duel of the Fates, because it was the fates of the Jedi versus the fate of the Sith in the galaxy. I personally think Sorasu, Xian, and Neiman all have their merits for defense and incorporating the Force. Yes, Neiman is essentially Shicho mastered. Neiman is a balanced form. DM So is the most aggressive form. That is why it was Darth Bane's favorite. Yes. He won because he had the high ground. Yeah, sorry, that's that's the one thing in the prequels that I just can't accept. The high ground is something very valuable in combat. Having the high ground, you have greater reach, you have greater advantage. So yeah. Juyo was the most aggressive. Yes, it was the most aggressive. However, DM So was precision aggression. Juyo is the more aggressive, but DM So is precision aggression. Meaning you had a level of control where Juyo is favored by most Sith, where DM So is aggression. However, it is aggression channeled properly. Sorasu is the best defensive, or is the essential defensive lightsaber form. Ataru is, or all of these lightsaber forms, by the way, have their weaknesses. However, this is another reason why Obi-Wan was seen as one of the best of the Order. It's because Yoda uses Ataru to answer for his short-statured weakness, where Mace Windu uses Vapod to channel his own weakness of his own inner darkness and use it for a weapon of the light. What weakness does Obi-Wan have? He doesn't. He learned Sorosu because he felt it was the most applicable to him. And he never really thought about it as a term of weakness or what his weakness was. He essentially is like, I never really thought about that. And that is why you are not a master of Sorosu. You are the master of Sorosu. You are the perfect person to go up against Grievous. Grievous ran from you for a reason. Not just because of your lightsaber technique, but because of how well you commanded the Force, even though the Force commanded him. Vapod also tapped into a person's own personal darkness. Yes. And that is why Sidious versus Mace Windu was so even-footed. It was an impasse. Neither one would win unless one gave ground. Palpatine gave ground because he realized he had seduced Anakin to the point where Anakin would step in to defend him. So yes, while there are some who believe that Mace Windu beat Palpatine, no. He understood that Anakin would step in his defense over Mace Windu. Did you think Obi-Wan Kenobi could reach the rank of Grand Master? In time? Yes. In time, yes. Say Palpatine was defeated. Anakin had defeated him and whatnot in the Chancellor's office if he had actually stayed in the light. And after Yoda had passed on at 900 years old, Obi-Wan Kenobi would have possibly been seen or allowed to be, or would have been elected as Grand Master of the Order. His weakness is cookies. Yeah. But yes, I do believe that Obi-Wan Kenobi would have possibly reached Grand Master if he had survived, if events had not transpired the way they did. Wouldn't have been a long, or because yes. Also, he wouldn't have looked as ragged as he did, or he wouldn't have looked like Alec Guinness if he hadn't lived on Tatooine for 20 years. Shout out to Alec Guinness, or may he rest in peace. Broke my heart when I heard he passed on. 96 years old, though. He had a good life. When Alec Guinness passed on, I actually went outside onto my front porch and I played the Jedi theme on my keyboard. Orange Hat. Favorite prequel trilogy scores. Battle of the Heroes, Duel of the Fates are my two favorites of the prequel scores. But yes, talking of Vapod, to get into Vapod, a lot of people say Vapod is the 7th form of combat. It's actually the 8th, or there are other Form 7s, but Vapod is a derivative of Form 7. That's what some people don't realize. And unfortunately, others made the mistake of incorporating Vapod in the Old Republic, which was a dumb fucking thing. Oh, Orange Hat. Obi-Wan's weakness was those bugs from 2003 Clone Wars. He just couldn't eat them. Oh, that is awesome, dude. The 8th form is the flying lightsaber form, right? Ataru, I believe, is Form 5. Oh, the flying... Oh, you're talking about that shit from Rebels. No. Folks, there is so much fucking wrong with that. I will discuss Rebels in the Disney one 3 weeks from now. Make sure you bring that up at that time. No, Star Wars, or it's Star Wars with a T, or it starts with a T. Oh, I'm blanking. It's not from Rebels, it's EU. Oh, okay. Shit, I'm blanking on the damn form. Let me look it up. Oh, What are 7 forms of lightsaber combat? Makashi, Neiman, Yo. Oh, gee. What the fuck? What is the form 7 of lightsaber combat? Juyo. Vapad is a derivative of Juyo. Yes, it is. There is no 8th form. That shit was created later. Ugh. Taru is form 4, yeah. But I'm looking it up if this thing would actually Oh, no. Let me look it up again. Jarkai. Jarkai is a combat term. I do believe Neozoic. Jarkai is like a submission term. I do believe. I could be wrong though. I'm not 100% sure. 7 saber forms. Kashi Neiman. Christ. Lightsaber combat. Yes, there we go. Wikipedia. As much as I do not like the people who run Wikipedia, Wikipedia is still useful to a degree. Legends. I am not going to go by the Disney shit. Is dual blade fencing. That's Makashi. Jet Sparks. Makashi is which is form 2. Dual blade fencing. Oh yeah, Jarkai. Yeah, Jarkai is a 2-formed lightsaber. Anakin said to Obi-Wan, "But Master, you were the one who said I should feed off the living force." What the fuck? Oh right, yeah. All right, let's see here. Shicho, form 1. Form 2 is Makashi. 3 is Sorisu. 4 is Ataru. 5 is Xian and Diamso. 6 is Niman. And 7 is Juyo and Vapad. So, yeah. The unorthodox and hybrid fighting methods. Zest, Takata, Sokan, Form 0, Dunmok. Yeah. There's several other things. But yeah, it doesn't start, or there's no one with a T. That starts with a T. Yes, 7 is Juyo and Vapad. But yeah. And, hey, man, we all make mistakes. But yeah, those are my thoughts, folks. Shit, we went over way over the time that I was meaning to go. But you know what? There's nobody here, so actually it allows me to talk a little bit more, and I like talking about it. So keep those comments coming if you want, or if you want me to comment on more stuff. If I find it, I'll leave it in the comments. I read it a long time ago, and that's all right. But yeah, but if there is nothing else, I will also start heading out because there is other things I got to get ready. The saber staff, aka the double-bladed lightsaber, was Exar Kun's lightsaber. That was a reason why Plagueis didn't approve of Maul. Oy. Maul refined Exar Kun's design. He realized that he would never be able to handle, or because, folks, here is your standard lightsaber hilt. Your standard lightsaber hilt. You can have, or you can employ a 2-handed grip. This was, or when it comes to Exar Kun's lightsaber, he had a double-bladed lightsaber with a blade on the other end, but he didn't have an extended blade. He had a single-handed hilt lightsaber with a blade that came out the back end as well. when it comes to double-bladed lightsaber combat, Exar Kun is unrivaled. Tispest. Yeah, that one. All right. Yeah, I heard about it, but that it was a variant form. It was not one of the 7 forms. But also, do you know the weakness of the double-bladed lightsaber, folks? If you want to know the weakness of the double-bladed lightsaber, tune in 2 weeks, and I will explain it. Spinning attack. Yeah, it's a variant of Ataru. Anyway, folks, that is going to be the video or the stream. Thank you to everybody who was in here: Becky Brown, Neozoic, David, Jet Sparks, Davian, Nerdy Ogre. Nerdy Ogre, if you are on Twitter, hit me up on Twitter at OrangeHat2185 or OrangeHat Reviews. I've finally gotten my original Twitter back, folks. So everybody in the chat, thank you so much for tuning in. Y'all are freaking awesome people. Next week will be I will be discussing the original trilogy and lore of the original trilogy movies. And yes, we will even be discussing the Kith and all that shit from Empire Strikes Back. Because I like to break down these controversial things and basically destroy them, because I will be exposing ignorance. Am I on Discord? Yes, I am on Discord. Look up Orange Hat Reviews on Discord. You should find me there. So yes, I'm on Discord. But yes, combination of elements, Form 7 and traditional scripture aerial dueling was a type of aerial lightsaber combat. Basically, the name meant heart palpitation in the Scritic language. Okay. But yes, yes, thank you. Take care, Orange Hat or Orange Vanya, Kitty, Christian, Becky, David, Ogre, Jet Sparks, Damien, and the rest of the good folks in the chat. Thank you all so much. The weakness of double-bladed lightsaber is getting it cut in half. Clever, but that's not it. So anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Next week is the original trilogy and lore of the original trilogy, as well as the week after will be EU thoughts, and the final week of theme streams will be my thoughts on Disney canon, or Disney's head canon, or their interpretation of Star Wars, to be 100% more accurate. Like Stormtroopers on the hit shit. I will discuss that. I will destroy that as well, folks. Anyway, you all have a wonderful day, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Orange Hat. I will be on the Barroom podcast tonight at 9 p.m. on Society Reviews channel. So stay tuned for that one. And also my my streams for singles and ones and twos with Mara are pushed back to next week and the week after, because there was personal stuff that happened and we had to reschedule. So thank you so much for tuning in, folks. You all have an amazing day, and always remember to stay humble.